If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. This African proverb begs the question of the Charis Fellowship. How can we best accomplish God's mission? My name is Tellez, and I live in Clarkston, Georgia. I'm married to Carlos, who I sometimes refer to as Juanca, so if you hear that, know that I only have one husband. We have 4 kids, and 75% of them are really thriving in the pandemic. I'm kidding, they are all fine. We've been married for 19 years, and Carlos literally asked me to marry him by asking if I wanted to be a church planter's wife. I said yes, so I guess that just shows how much ministry has been in our DNA since we got married. We served a couple of years church planting in Honduras, and then we moved to we moved to Winona Lake, Indiana, so that Carlos could go to seminary. Our plans were not God's plans, and our 5-year stint turned into 11 years. Then 4 years ago, Grace Church of Greater Akron approached us to ask if we would be interested in being on a team to plant a multi-ethnic church in Atlanta, Georgia. You know, one of the things that I've learned in my years as an adult and in my experience in ministry is that learning what I am not good at is perhaps just as beneficial as learning what I am good at. And until I figure that out, I run the risk of getting in the way of what God is doing in His community and in His mission. Carlos and I hit a gold mine when we were partnered with Pete and Anna Yu to plant this church in Atlanta, Georgia. Anna and I are polar opposites. We get along great, but we thrive in ministry contexts that are complete opposite. If you know me, aside from teaching, what I really, really value is sitting with small groups of people with coffee and conversation in hand. Anna, on the other hand, comes alive when it comes to big events. Any event that involves planning and organizing, lots of people, food, and possibly the need for marketing makes her eyes sparkle. She has 3 small children, and yet she still will find the time to make these kinds of events happen. Events in which I shrivel. In the past, when I've been confronted with these areas of ministry where I'm not good at, I've been tempted in 2 ways. The first way is that I'm tempted to disregard that area of ministry in which I don't thrive because it doesn't mean very much to me. The second way that I am tempted is feeling guilty that I'm not a part of it and then to try to do it myself. What I've learned and am learning is not only to value the things that I'm not good at, but to recognize when others have me beat. Like in that instance, what I need to do is to submit myself to Anna's expertise and leadership and let her shine. I've experienced this in my own ministry, and I've also seen it play out in the larger fellowship. When Grace Church Akron asked us if we wanted to be a part of a multi-ethnic church plant in Atlanta, our first question was possibly a question that you've asked as well. What does a white, Midwestern mega church know anything about planting a multi-ethnic, non-mega model church in the South? The answer to that question was really the tipping point for us saying yes to join this mission here in Atlanta. The leaders at Grace said, "We don't know how to plant a multi-ethnic church. If we did know, we'd be doing it. We need you to do this because we don't know how." Whoa, that blew my mind. Here's a group of church leaders who have written books on church planting and evangelism who admit that they're not good at something and they value it anyway. Do you know how incredibly valuable that is to the mission of God? I wonder how much more we could accomplish in God's mission if we would recognize what we're not good at, where we would see where others have us beat, and we would lift them up to the task. A few weeks ago, our family watched Hidden Figures, It's a Hollywood rendition of a group of mathematicians and engineers who were key to getting the first American astronauts into space. You would think that the US government was so passionately determined to beat Russia in the space race that the mentality would have been all hands on deck. And yet, because these incredibly gifted brains belonged to African Americans who also happened to be women, they ran up against barrier after barrier in their attempt to fully use their skills for the mission. After the movie, our family went for a walk, and I had this nagging question in my mind that finally came out. If NASA had brought all the brains to the table, would the US have really been the first in putting men in space? Actually, that wasn't really my question. I think I know the answer to that question. No, my question had more to do with the church. See, the church has been invited to be a part of something much bigger than flying in space. The church has been invited to be a part of God's mission to reconcile people to Himself and to each other. That's huge. To be about transformed lives, restored relationships, new creations. And unfortunately, like NASA, the church hasn't always been good about bringing the whole body to the table. And my nagging question was, what has not been accomplished in God's mission by excluding parts of the body? Not only that, but Jesus makes it pretty clear that it is when we love each other, when we show that out of this world unity, that we truly reflect to the world who He is. Grace Church Akron has this one value: we have no spare parts. I think this value is intentionally to counter our tendency to exclude, to value and equip parts of the body that are like us to the exclusion of others. In the church, we have no spare parts. We need every single person in the body to be their full selves in Christ in order for God's mission to be carried out in its fullness. We've been learning, perhaps slowly, that this means we can't do the hard things unless everyone's at the table. A few years ago, the most powerful display of this in our fellowship was the introduction of the Charis Alliance, a recognition that globally we're better together. I also think of Barb Ruler, who rose to the occasion to bring together churches and ministries to work together, because we can't rise to the occasion very well alone. I think of church planters partnering under assist, because church planters burn out at rapid speeds. We need people to have our backs when we're doing kingdom work. I think of the amazing staff at GBIF who love Jesus and also love numbers and invest in amazing ways to make God's mission go forward. I think of the partnership forming between Women of Grace and Compass and Aspire to equip and recognize men and women to be leaders and teachers who correctly handle the word of truth in their context of ministry. I think of Grace Theological Seminary that acknowledges that some training is best done outside the classroom. And so they partner with local churches through Deploy to equip ministers to serve in their local contexts. And I think of all the unnamed members of our fellowship who are actively living out their love for Jesus, making Him make sense at their jobs, in their schools, in their homes, on social media, and in their margins. And I also know that we can do better. We can look around and ask ourselves, who is not at the table? Because the mission of God is too important to leave anybody out. When we join God in what He is doing, recognizing the areas in which we lack and where others shine, and when we are committed to bringing everyone to the table, then we can truly celebrate our unity in mission.